And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Hello, Nora. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I was just telling Brian, I've been in Denver the last 3 weekends, which is a very dry place at like 10% humidity and no air. So if my voice sounds a little crackly, a little dry, that's why. I just spent too much time in low humidity. Now I'm back to Sacramento where I think humidity was like 88% yesterday or something. It
Oh,
was very
wow.
high. So that's a good thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
good. That's good. I saw
We got a little
something
summer.
that showed that there was going to be some weather coming through Northern California and Oregon. And so I was like, oh, you guys might get a little bit.
Yep. Yep. Indeed.
So last week we had a great conversation with Irene McCormick on menopause. And I thought it'd be a good idea to let's take that a step further. She talked about her
Mhm.
program and some of her thoughts. And I always think that there's always multiple sides to every coin and every conversation.
Right.
And for a general thing, she's focused a lot. She's, I mean, really dove deep into menopause and research and things like that. But for the general practitioner out there, I think just giving some general guidelines to working with people as we age uh, and as our bodies change would be a good thing. So we can talk about that today if you're game for that. Excellent.
So, wanted to start a little bit. So, she said a bunch of things last time, and a couple of things that we wanted to focus on was the influence of hormones on both our stress levels, our cognitive levels,
Yeah.
even our ability to build muscle tissue. Like, there's all kinds of things that do change. Again, whether you're male or female. And
Yep.
I mentioned this a little bit last time, but for women, it can be kind of like their hormones often fall off a cliff, like they're there and then they go woo down really fast. My understanding of testosterone decline in men is it tends to be a little more gradual, a little bit less
Yeah.
of a cliff and more of just a slow incline, depending, of course. And all those things also relate. We've talked about this. This has been a theme because Brian and I are both of an age, but there's been a theme of just working with clients that are not 20, 30-year-old bomb-proof athletes, because that's a lot of our clientele. And so to think about hormones, we wanted to think about a couple things. We'll start with estrogen loss, right? Estrogen loss.
Mhm.
Estrogen goes away, and several things happen. Um, and one thing I wanted to mention was you build muscle less well without estrogen. Estrogen really helps to build and maintain muscle mass. So it also, of course, builds and maintains bone density. So it really
Mhm.
assists with keeping you from getting osteoporosis or osteopenia. On the physiological side, there's certainly an emotional ability that also happens with that, which you may notice in some of your older clients that they're a little more like woo than they used to be, or your spouse, or whoever you're working with, or your colleagues in your business. And it also has some cognitive effects too, all of which can really increase or change somebody's stress levels. So that's our intro. There's more to say, Brian.
Yeah. Well, before we get into it too deeply, I wanted to remind everybody, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button, comment as much as you can. We really appreciate it. If you enjoy what we're saying, tell us. And if you're not enjoying what we're saying, well, keep it to yourself. No, kidding. But please let us know what you're thinking. We appreciate it. You can always get in touch with us also through social media on Instagram at Moving Convos, and movingconvos@gmail.com is our email address. So with that being behind us, what I've noticed about my clients, and I'm just going to say of a certain age, I'm not going to necessarily say they're in menopause because it was interesting. When I first started learning about menopause, this was many moons ago, I had a number of clients who were sort of going through what they called the change. And one was in her late 60s. And
Wow.
my thought was, wait a minute, everything I've heard from school and from everything said it should happen late 40s, early 50s, sometimes early 40s. And with her, she was still, having her menstrual cycle all the way until she was
Wow.
almost 70. And
Wow.
she started having her change in her late 60s. So that was one of the first people that I ever met that was very different on that scale of the cycle of
That's
life.
really different. Yeah.
It's very late.
That's an
It's very
outlier.
late. But what that told me is that there is a spectrum of people, because I also had a client who started in her late 30s. Her doctor just said,
Yeah.
look, and
Yep.
she was saying, no, I can't be. And said, look, your hormones are changing, and it's starting a little earlier for you. It
Yeah.
starts a little later for some. So I really see that that is a spectrum. And yes, it's a bell curve. Most people are going to be in the middle section, but we're going to have outliers. So when you see clients who may be exhibiting things that are just sort of uncharacteristic at times, especially, and we know those people, we work with them often enough. We're like, they're just acting a
You
little
know,
bit different.
you know their moods. I mean, you do. If you work with somebody 2 or 3 times a week for 2 or 3 years, you kind of get a sense of their range.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Yeah.
when they start acting differently to a significant degree, that's usually the time when I usually don't say anything that would offend. I'll just ask them, when's the last time you went in for a checkup? And it's an easy way that I do it is just saying, I was updating our files and I didn't have the last time you went for a checkup and blood work. And,
Mm.
and a lot of times I'm looking for A1C, I'm looking for certain things. So I just say, oh, when's the last time? Just to make sure that someone's looking.
Right.
And
Right.
for a client who's in their early 40s, a lot of times it's like, well, I don't know, last time 5, 6 years ago. So, oh, wouldn't be a bad idea. I said, if it's been 5 years, heck, I know my body's changed in 5 years. And I make a joke of it.
Yeah.
And it usually lands at least that they're like, oh, that's not a bad idea. And at least then
Yeah.
someone's watching and they can take a
Yeah.
look and see where they are. So to me, that's usually how I approach it is if I start noticing anything, because it's true. You get to see things and you see people's patterns change.
Hmm. Absolutely. So that kind of gives that scope, right? And some of it is your clients. I mean, people generally going to tell me if I ask them if they're postmenopausal, they'll tell me.
Mhm.
Again, probably easier for me than for you just to ask that point blank, because I'll just ask it and they'll go like, yeah, no, or whatever they are. um, so a couple things to think about there is one is just, we talked about this in terms of our sarcopenia situation as well, that exercise
Mhm.
becomes really, 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 really important at this time of life for all kinds of reasons, like blood sugar levels, stress levels, maintaining muscle mass, maintaining bone density. Like if you weren't exercising between, in your 30s into your 40s because of kids and business and work and whatever, you should get on it now, right? Because at
Mhm.
this point, it becomes more critical just to long-term health and longevity and having quality of life as you get older.
Yeah.
So one thing that I want to bring up there is exactly that. Is just not just exactly that, but what changes in terms of your exercise routine as you get older.
Yeah.
So again, some people start their exercise routine older. That's great. Other people have a very intense one. My clients who've been runners forever, or they've been, athletes of one kind or another, pickleball players or tennis players or whatever, and they're really serious about it. There comes a point in life where that kind of hard driving, kind of CrossFit, aggressive exercise is actually counterproductive.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that happens when hormones decline, especially estrogen and progesterone, is then you can get an increase in cortisol. So there's this kind of cortisol balance there. And cortisol is a stress hormone. And if
Yep.
you activate that stress hormone, that can often, with again, postmenopausal clients, lead to things like weight gain and things that you don't necessarily want to have happen. So there's often a trying to get a different approach to exercise for your more type A clients, and have them understand like you need to move, but you kind of need to move with a little less stress. So understand that, like, because sometimes workouts can be really pushed. Like I think about the Peloton, kick it, kiss it, crush right, whatever, get really
Yep.
aggressive with it. And there's a point where that's not actually going to give you the results that you want. You actually want to have a slightly less stress induced exercise routine, still moving, still exercising, still, getting your numbers up and doing your work, but not with that level of like push and stress and overdose of cortisol.
And when we talk to our clients, I'm sure you know these clients as well as I do. Their bodies may be changing, their age is changing. However, their personalities may not be changing that much. And if they were type A and they were gung ho as 20-year-olds and
Yeah.
they may not have lifted a weight in the last 10 years, well, guess what? They're still going to go to the gym and do the same workout they did when they were 20. And for the women, they're going to try and do 2 spinning classes a week and 3, group exercise classes plus lift weight and all this kind of stuff. And the men are going to be doing, okay, I need to do, 4 days a week on, 1 day off, lifting, super heavy and all this kind of stuff. It's like, well, your body's different. You're not the same person you were. Up here, you might feel it, but in
Yeah.
here, the muscles really are going to be responding much, much differently. And we need to respect that. And as a trainer, I always find that it's my job to find out where that line is, how to push them, and sometimes how to make them feel like I'm pushing them so
Yes.
that
Without
it
causing trouble.
yes. So I may
Yeah.
work on form a little bit more or balance or something that challenges something that they're not used to, that they're
Hmm.
going to find difficult, or put them on an unstable apparatus or something that will change the way that they're doing it and slow them down so that I'm not going to get that high stress response, but they're still going to feel like they're working hard. So sometimes it's tricking them a little bit. So it's not just high intensity interval training and, go, 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 go all the time. So I think that we have to do that and moderate that. And that's part of our job.
And I'd say that's increasing the mindful component.
Yes.
Right. I mean, everything you said was really like all those challenges are not about, more reps, longer, et cetera. They're about increasing the mental challenge.
Yep.
Balance is fundamentally a, neurological situation, and finding good form is essentially a kind of neurological situation, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So a lot of times it's finding that more mindful approach to things.
Yeah.
One thing, I've studied acupuncture. Some of you guys may or may not know that, but I was an acupuncturist for a long time. And I also studied a lot of martial arts and, qigong and that kind of thing. And one of the things that was interesting that a lot of my teachers said was when we're younger, we have more young, like we have energy we need to burn off, was the analogy they used, right? And you do, you got to like do stuff because you just got all this energy in your body, got to move it through. And then there comes a point where that shifts, and instead of moving energy out, like through exercise, like throwing energy off, if you will, we need to start pulling that energy in and really cultivating our energy rather than dispersing it.
I
And
like that
and
metaphor.
that's it's I mean, when I saw a lot of my teachers, because I worked with a lot of teachers who in their 80s and their 90s, and yeah, they were really strong, really vital, really alive, and really vibrant, and they did not do what they did when they were 20, because I knew what they did when they were 20. They'll do their qigong, or they'll do their internal practices in a really different way, and much
Yeah.
more of a mindful way. And I think that's an important thing to think about, is when is that, when do you have so much energy you need to burn it off? And then where is that point where you actually need to start cultivating your energy? And cultivating energy does not mean resting. I also want to be
Mhm.
really clear on that. Like, that doesn't mean, oh, I'm just going to relax. I think about my mother-in-law, and every time I went to her house, it was like, oh, honey, you work so hard, just sit down. Just like, oh, just like, I don't sit. I'm sorry, I don't sit. That's a certain mentality that certainly a lot of my mother's generation and
It's
on, like,
generational.
oh,
Mhm.
you've worked so hard, you should just relax, and actually that's not good. Like, really, you want to cultivate energy, which means working at a level that allows you to maintain your energy, right? So instead of feeling like at the end of a workout, you need to take a nap, or you're exhausted and you're sweating, like, oh my God, I got to go sit down for an hour. It's like working at the level where you can work and do your work. Maybe it's an hour workout or whatever it is, and then carry on with your life. And that's a very simple way of saying I'm cultivating my energy rather than using up my energy, rather than burning my energy.
I like that analogy, and I can relate in that, in what we do. I was just talking to my son about this. We have clients that are energy givers, and we have some that
Yeah.
are energy
Yep.
vampires.
Yep. Yep.
Yes,
Goes
they
both
take it
ways.
away from us. Workouts are the same way. There are some
Mhm.
workouts where afterwards you do need a nap, where at the end you can't lift your
You're
arm.
done. You're
You're
done, right?
done.
Like, I'm done. Everything's used
Yeah,
up.
exactly. You've squeezed every little ounce out of that sponge as possible. And there's a time and a place for that type of workout. And when you're young, maybe more often. When you're a little older, and with some of my clients, I like them to feel energized as they walk out the door, because most of them I'm
Mhm.
working out before they're going to work. I do mostly mornings. So I want them to go, yep, I'm ready. Good. They walk in dragging.
Yeah. Yeah.
carrying their coffee thinking, oh, do I need this today? But at the end, they walk out feeling more energized. So the workout is actually giving them energy. But if I did something that was hot, super high intensity that drained them, well, how are they going to make it through the day? It's my mindset. It's like, are they going to be able to perform mentally later that day? Or
Right.
do they need to go home and take it easy for an hour or two before they can even do something? So I think that
Right.
that is sort of a mindset that I think is a good idea, is to think, okay, what can we do that's going to help energize people and make them
Hmm.
feel better rather than make them feel more tired necessarily?
Yeah, the other thing too that I think about at this point in life is that for a lot of my clients, um, working out is not, the goals are different. Like for a
For
lot of them,
sure.
it's just, I want to be able to keep traveling, or I want to be able to play with my grandkids, or, those kind of goals. But it's also, they just want to feel better. A lot of times
Hmm.
at this point, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, etc. People have just, it's like things just start to hurt a little bit. Things start to
Hmm.
break down a bit. And so, working out that really brings more satisfaction, brings less discomfort, increases their ability to feel comfortable in their body and good in their
Hmm.
body, makes a huge difference. Again, in
Yep.
terms of how they feel. Like then I'm done with my workout and I feel like I'm ready for the day, instead of I'm done with my workout and oh my God, I'm dead.
Yep. Yep.
You
And I
know?
think that's a mentality thing too that we need to train our clients to
Yes,
have.
yes,
Because
yes.
if all they know is, well, I didn't
Boom,
break a
boom,
sweat.
boom. Push, push,
So
push. Yeah.
I have one client, love him to pieces. He just turned 60. He is the biggest type A I've ever met. He, his idea of a great vacation is one where he never stops moving, will cycle 100
Uh-huh.
miles a day, will
Yep.
do these things. And he drags his wife along. And I'm thinking, poor thing, because she's at that age, she's in her mid 50s. And I'm thinking, she keeps up with him. But I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there comes a point where your body is just going to say, no mas, no
Enough.
mas.
Yeah.
And but that's just his personality. So when we work out, sometimes he teases me that didn't even break a sweat today. I'm like, that's good. We did what your body needed today. We may have done things that you wouldn't do on your own. I did more mobility work with you today. We stretched things differently. We opened up. We did three-dimensional training rather than the same thing every time. And when I explain that, he's like, yeah, 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 yeah. But it seeps in. It seeps in a little bit because he doesn't quit.
He
So I know he needs it.
I was he keeps coming back. So he needs to give you grief, which is fine. Like clients can give you grief all day long. If they keep coming back, they're getting something out of it that's valuable to them, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And again, it's our job to moderate that. And there are some times that I do train him so that, he is exhausted afterwards. It's like, okay, once in a while, not a bad thing. Especially if he says,
Yeah.
I just was on, I just came back from such and such and haven't worked out in 3 days. And then I'm
Right.
like, okay, you need this for your mentality as well. You need to
Right.
just
Yeah.
burn.
Yeah.
So it's our job, like I said, to really figure out what the client needs. And that takes some skill, and that takes, learning who the client is.
Yeah, which it always does, right?
Oh,
Every client
absolutely.
has their own unique things that motivate them or that demotivate them or that, inspire them or, don't. And you've all got to, that's a lot of our job, is to find the things that really help that client to move forward.
Absolutely.
Um, One other thing I wanted to mention, which relates a little bit to this whole cortisol piece, is one thing I've talked to many, many women about is estrogen is a really good multitasking hormone. And what I mean
Mm,
by that, and if you think about a woman's life cycle, estrogen is highest when traditionally, typically, we would be having children. And if any of you have children out there, I'm sure many of you do, multitasking is kind of what you're about for quite a few years, right? Like what's happened with Alice? Okay, Luigi needs his diaper change. So-and-so needs to go go to the doctor. Like you're just running the household in that multitasking way, which is different for men. A lot of the men I know, it's like, I don't multitask. Like I've more, like I can only think about one thing at a time. Many, many men have told me that. And women, it's like, we can't afford that. I mean, particularly when we're in our childbearing years and raising kids and stuff. So estrogen is really good at that. And one of the things that I use my sister as an example, she's a lawyer. And when she first felt her estrogen going, like the thing that she lost was her ability to multitask. And so I think about many of the women that I know who are in high-powered professions, who are used to like, having a lot of brain power and a lot of ability to get stuff done. And suddenly they can't do it as effectively as they used to because of the hormone change. And that will also increase your cortisol levels, right? So then you have kind of like a negative double whammy of you can no longer use your brain the way you used to. Your cognitive abilities are just changed in terms of how they
Mhm.
function. And that means you can't do your job the way you used to. And that means that your cortisol level goes up because your stress level goes up. So there's also just, that whole piece to it because, most people that I know are still doing very high level jobs into their 50s, 60s, 70s even,
Yeah.
with that change in sometimes in their brain power. So
And what's interesting is that can increase their amount of stress to a point where, their cortisol goes up. They can't function as well. They
yep.
can't multitask. That means they can't get as much done in a day. That means more things
Mhm.
are on their desk. And it's just that downward spiral that never
Exactly.
changes. And
Exactly. Just piles up.
it just piles up. And like you said, for attorneys, here in DC. Most of my
Yeah.
clients are attorneys, and they say they're scared to go on vacation because they come back and their desk is just suddenly covered, and now they have to work twice as hard to catch up for those 2 weeks because the work doesn't stop. It still
Yeah.
piles up.
The flow continues, right? The river keeps
Exactly.
going, whether you're in it or not. Yeah.
Exactly. So that can really set you up for a little bit of a disaster. And I've noticed even for myself, as I've aged, coming from a male perspective, you know, that things have changed. I fatigue easier. I don't recover nearly as quickly after a workout. I have to adjust my workouts. I try and keep up with my 17-year-old. He and I work out together on the weekends. And
Good
I've
luck
had
on
to
that.
modify my weights. Yeah, exactly. He's getting stronger and he's got
he's
tons of
he's he's
testosterone.
passing you soon. Yeah, he's
I'm
passing
thinking,
you.
oh my gosh, how is this happening? I'm still stronger, but not by much. And I'm thinking, okay, these two kids, and my other one's 14, and he's already, blossoming. I'm like, oh, I'm dead meat.
You're doomed. Yep.
I'm
You're
doomed.
at
There's
you're
nothing
at
I
that
can do.
transition time, right? The younger ones come up and the old dog has to get wiser because you're not necessarily going to get stronger. You got
Yep.
to be smarter, right?
Yep. And part of
Yeah.
that is I just don't work out as often.
Mhm.
So try and give myself more rest. So if I
Mhm.
do work out intensely, I change my rep range. I go a little higher, lower weights, still enough to produce a change in the body, but I try and change where failure is. I think in weight training, a lot of male ego is
Mm.
lift as much weight as possible. And when we hit failure, if we hit it on rep 8, that's perfect. Well, if you hit it on rep 8 or rep 12 or 15 or 20, if you're still going to failure, relative failure, you're still going to the point where you're exhausted, either you have to stop. Well, you're still pushing yourself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was watching former world strongest man Brian Shaw do something that they do in the combines, which is 225-pound bench press, and you do it as many times as you can.
Oof.
And you'd think he's the world's strongest man. He should be able to do this forever. Well, no, he hit 40 some odd reps, which is still world
A lot.
class,
Yes.
and he couldn't get that last one up. There's still a point of failure, even in endurance work, where
Mhm.
you can still push your body to a certain point without asking for the same breakdown as if you're doing a ton of weight. So you can still change that repetition range and still push your body, but push it in a safer way that you may not have as much breakdown. You may not have as much, force on your body that may keep you a little safer. And that's at least what I try and do for my clients. We still push, but we just moderate that a little bit,
Well,
higher rep range.
and breakdown happens faster
Oh,
and
yeah.
recovery happens slower. So I mean that's the other piece about that is that if I'm working and I don't do as much heavy weight as you for sure. I'm a Pilates teacher, so I'm in a different environment. But if I'm pushing somebody one way or the other, like I would push them to a certain level, but it's
Mhm.
kind of like, especially in this age range, I'm not going to push them to the point where they're fatiguing and where they're then going to have to take 2 or 3 days to recover.
Right.
Right, because I just find that that's for a lot of older clients, that leads to inflammation, that leads to, and sometimes because of a variety of things, inflammation goes up, cortisol doesn't help that either.
Mhm.
And basically they don't recover. And then if they don't recover, then we can't keep progressing. So it's kind of like, again, finding that line, right? That line that keeps things moving, keeps them increasing their repetitions, increasing their resistance, increasing their form and their ability to have quality of movement without causing that breakdown or so much of that breakdown. At least that's, that's a lot of how Pilates works anyway, is it doesn't really cause,
Sure.
failure in that way. It just addresses the body in a whole bunch of different angles and gets, everything working together, ideally, in a more integrated fashion.
I have I have a question. You may not be able to answer this, but it's something that I've kind of wondered is with the change in hormones. Uh, there's a lot of people who are resistant to taking hormones, whether
Hmm.
it be male, female. Males, I think, are a lot more apt to jump on the hormone wagon just because
Certainly
it's
at the
legal
moment they are.
steroids. Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah,
see it on television all the
yes, at the
time.
moment it's a thing. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a thing, and you can almost get it, just online. You can talk to a doctor and just say, "Hey, I feel bad," and they're gonna give you a prescription. But that's
pretty
something that
much.
men will jump into. But there's a
Yeah.
long time with my clients that were telling me that they did not want to take hormone replacements. They were scared of
Mhm.
them, that it caused
Mhm.
changes in their body. Coming from more of the medical standpoint that I've dealt with my clients from that way, especially for osteoporotic clients, is look,
Yeah.
hormone replacement may be the one missing link to get you from being osteopenia to normal or osteoporotic to osteopenia because
Mhm.
it's one of the keys.
Right.
So maybe that's a good idea, but it's not really my place to say that necessarily because it's their body. I'm not going to make a choice. But why is it so why are women hesitant to jump on that? When I've asked them, some of them just say, "Well, I was told not to." But they didn't
Okay.
really have a deep understanding of why, and I thought maybe you might be able to
Yeah.
enlighten me.
I'll say a few things. So one thing, this gets a little bit into, well, I'm just going to go there. So one of the challenge, no, one of the challenges with women's health in general is that it is under studies, it is underfunded, and it is
Oh,
underdone. So, for example, with hormone replacement therapy, the doctors started saying, "Hey, this is great. You'll basically be, endlessly young. Start taking." I mean, the history of it is slightly horrifying. There was very little studies done. There's very little tests done.
mm.
If it had been men, they would have done a whole lot more
Oh,
studies. It's just,
okay.
that's
Yeah.
just that's how that worked. So it wasn't really until women had been on hormone replacement therapy, because that was just the standard, like, oh, you're going through the change, let's stop it, give you some hormones. And oh, a lot of women, that worked fine. They thought it worked fine, and then they ended up with breast cancer. They ended up with kind of other kinds of things, some cardiovascular issues and other situations. So um, now they're just a whole lot. Well, they're a whole lot better. Number one, there actually have been studies now that have followed, like the a nurses study, I think, whatever it's called. There's a big study, women's health study,
Mhm.
that looked at hormone replacement therapy and kind of outlined what the risks were for certain populations. If I'm of Jewish descent and I have the BRCA, the BRCA genes, I am not going to take hormone replacement therapy because the likelihood of me getting breast cancer is kind of high.
Right.
So some of it is just, what is your particular reason for not taking it? For a lot of women, it does do weird things, both like weight gain, or usually weight gain, not usually weight loss. So they gain weight. Sometimes it does mental weird things to them. Some people have like breakthrough bleeding. So there's all kinds of odd
Mm.
ways that the body responds to hormone replacement. And sometimes that's just uncomfortable. Sometimes it's intolerable. Side effects are what they are. Some people are fine, some people are not. Um, and they're not really benign. And it also often takes, like, the women I know who've really been successfully on them, they'll be on them for a period of time, and it takes them a while to go, okay, what is the level of estrogen and progesterone at what times and in what combinations that work for that woman? And that can be an annoyingly long process to find, like, the balance that really works well. So for all those reasons,
Mhm.
it's challenging. And then most doctors don't recommend you stay on it forever. Most doctors say, well, do this to get over, like, think of a friend of mine who was having particular issues. So she basically went on it for a short period of time to kind of get through some really severe hot flashes that were kind of ruining her life and keeping her from sleeping. And then, she just had to sort of taper it off of it and felt much better by the end of that.
It's good to know that
So,
they can do that. The reason I ask is, one, I've always been curious, but number two, like you said, I was in the last week, believe it or not, 3 different clients all came to me and started talking about hormones, menopause,
okay.
and things like that. So it was very much well, okay, very interesting that it's sort of the
When you open
topic of the
the
week.
box, Brian, it's like right, it shows up
And I
always.
never mentioned it to a single person. So I'm thinking that this hasn't even dropped yet.
Yeah,
Okay. But
yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things that it's on people's thought process. And like you said, for a lot of these women, they do come from that look. It hasn't been studied enough. And if all of
Mhm.
this happened to men, this would have been cured with a pill 50 years ago,
True that.
much like, ED. It's just, here's a pill, solved,
Yep.
whereas, but it's a woman's issue. So there's not as much money or research or fun or any of that stuff. So, that's
Right.
incredibly unfortunate. And at least there's more going in that direction now. Uh, but yeah, I've always wondered why some people have been very hesitant. And the side effects are definitely one of those issues. I totally get that.
Mhm.
But I've had a couple clients who go on them and say, I feel like me again. I just feel like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I feel 100%, or I feel better than I have in 20 years. Oh my gosh,
Yes.
I'm superwoman.
Yes, absolutely. So again, and it's just, there's all kinds of crazy celebrities out there and influencers who are like, "Woohoo, this is magic." So a lot of times it is every individual woman's reaction to the hormones that
Yeah.
make them do it or not. It's also like, is it solving a problem? It's like I feel fine, so I don't feel like I need more because
Right.
I feel pretty healthy as I am, and that the change wasn't that dramatic, and I'm like I'm good. But that's not true for everybody. And certainly for
Right.
somebody who is acutely osteoporotic, right, where osteoporosis is really an issue, and they want to maintain, let's say, a skiing habit or a pickleball habit. That's something where you may want to think like you don't want to take the risk given your high level of activity and desire for high level activity to break a bone. So,
Right.
I think a lot of it is those kind of choices.
Yeah. And when doing
Yeah.
the research, after we talked with Irene, I got curious. So I started doing a little bit and looking some of the meta studies. And it's amazing at how general exercise guidelines
I
are
know. I
when it
know
comes
they are
to
for everything.
it's really as though they don't want to give you a single specific except for
Mm-mm.
contraindications, which I appreciate. They say, look, if you have a history of osteoporosis or osteopenia, no high intensity, no plyometrics, but that's just good advice anyway.
Yeah.
But at least they're coming out and saying that. Uh, but they're also not giving great advice about, oh, here, go exercise. And I think that is good, but it does disservice to someone who doesn't know what they're doing.
Well, I mean, you and I have looked at enough research on movement to know like you don't get I don't get what I want out of any of those studies for the most
Yeah.
part. Right? Because they say things like, I mean, even if they say something like increase the strength of the quadriceps, like, okay, great, that's good. By how much and in what way and what, well, I mean, there's always details you'd like to have.
Mhm.
And exercise is like, I mean, what does that mean even? Does
Yeah.
that mean swimming? Like if you're osteoporotic and you swim, that does not change your bone mass, your
Yep.
bone density, because you're in an anti-gravity environment, for example, if you didn't know that. Right. So, and if it's osteoporosis, you're trying to deal with how do I load my bones? Like, how do I load my bones? And I've been down that path a lot in terms of osteoporosis, particularly. And somebody else was sending me down that path yesterday when I was talking to them. Like, how do we really create functional guidelines for something like osteoporosis where the general guidelines are don't flex? Okay, try putting on your shoes, try getting out of bed, try getting in your car, right? Like flexion is even if you're controlling it and containing it, like you have to do a certain amount of that just for ordinary life.
Yep.
So then it's like, okay, how do I develop the skills needed or the safety needed to do those tasks? And that's something that I keep looking like I really about every year or so, I'll look back through the osteoporosis literature and see if there's anything kind of new that's come up in terms of more specific guidelines as opposed to just no loaded flexion.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change that much.
No. The one
Uh,
of the meta studies that I read actually gave details that I was shocked. They actually gave like 7 or 8 exercises. And normally they rarely tell you what to
Yeah.
do. And these were load bearing. So at least
Uh-huh.
they were trying to help out, squats, stand up, sit downs, things like that, step ups,
Right.
because let's face it, a bicep curl is only going to load the bones where the muscle attaches. It's not going to load the
Yeah.
bones axially, whereas a
Yeah. Yeah.
squat will. So
Yeah.
it at least explained a little bit of that, which was good to read, and it
Awesome.
also explained a little bit more about maybe high intensity interval training isn't for you because of the
Mhm.
osteoporosis risk, but also because of the cortisol risk, of
Uh-huh. Right.
increasing that. So I appreciate that they gave some detail, but still not enough for the average person or the average trainer or Pilates instructor to really dig deep into this and realize, oh, here's what we need. Nobody wants
Mhm.
to sort of say, here's the exact prescription because look, everybody's body is different. So
Right.
everything has to be adjusted, but it's good to at least be put down the right path.
And just have some principles.
Mhm.
So like for me, the principles that I always do with my female clients of this age, in Pilates is I want to move them in as many ways I can. I'm going to load the body in as many ways as I can. So that is just like basic bone health, regardless kind of where they are. Focusing a lot on extension, making sure the spine is loaded, making sure the hip is loaded, making sure even that the shoulder and the arms are loaded.
Yep.
And again, it's usually body weight load. I mean, it can be reformer load too, if you think about, footwork and that kind of thing. But it's also like I've got force going like in an all fours position through my hands or in long stretch. If you think about Pilates, the
Mhm.
long stretch, right? I've got force going through the upper body, I've got force going through the lower body, I've got force going through the hips, I've got force going through the spine. And trying to just load that as well as I can and to think of it progressively. So that's the other thing is it's like it's easy. If you had a client for a million years, you kind of do the same program or close the same program and keep their springs at 3 reds or whatever it is. And like, nope, with this client who's working with osteoporosis, I've got to go from 3 reds to 3 reds into blue. And then I'm going to go to 3 reds into yellow. And
Mhm.
and really try to keep increasing that load. Because as the body will accommodate to whatever load is given.
Yep.
And classic example was one client I had who also had terrible migraines. So she was on a lot of medications that I think were also influencing her bone density.
Yes,
Um, yeah, which is
they
problematic.
do.
Yeah. But so she was a runner and she ran
Mm,
3 to 4 times a week for 3 to 4 miles. Like that's a good
that's
chunk
good.
of impact. But she'd been doing that for 12 years. She
Body's
hadn't
used to
really
it.
changed her mileage. So her bones had gotten used to it and she fractured a vertebra, or she fractured a rib, I should say, just reaching back to a filing cabinet behind her. Like
Ooh,
that's how sensitive her bones were. Um, so it's like how do we keep progressing and keep moving that slightly forward or giving different challenges or adding again homework and things that they can do.
yeah. No, I think when working with clients who have these issues, we really need to focus on what's the goal
Yeah.
with my
What's their
with
goal?
my what's their goal, not mine, what's their goal.
Yeah.
So, and if someone is osteoporotic or is afraid of it, that's one thing that they will tell you right off the bat. They will say, I need to work on this. So my
Yeah.
mindset immediately goes to weight bearing. It immediately goes to, okay, how can I load the body in an axial way that's going to really load those long bones as good as possible? And I want to take a look and see what their numbers are to, that way we
Yeah.
can look
Yep.
annually and see where they're at.
Yep.
If that's not their goal, but stress management is, and you can always see those people, those type A's, you
Yeah.
can see they come in wired exactly. We do have to modify what they're doing a little bit,
Yep.
and you can still challenge them without necessarily pushing them over the cliff so that they're going
Yep.
to need a ton of recovery time. So it really goes to whatever their goal is. And also, I hate to say this, but too many people, I think, still have the mindset that I need to do a lot of exercise. I need to do a lot of cardio. I need to do a lot of this in order to lose weight. So, that I'm going to exercise, 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 and I'm going to be doing cardio 5 days a week for an hour a day. And hey, your heart's going to love you for it. However, the
Mhm.
rest of your body may not. You may not
Right.
be able to recover from that. as easily as you did 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. So even moderating that may need some tweaking. I remember I had a client, I was working at the National Center for Weight and Wellness here in DC. I was consulting for them, and a person came in and said, I'm ready to do this. And she had about 100 pounds to lose. But she just joined a gym, and she said, I'm going to work out 6 days a week, and I'm going to work out for an hour and a half to 2 hours a day, and da 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 da. And I just sat there listening. And I said, okay, then what? She goes, what do you mean? I said, you're going to plateau. Everybody plateaus. It's the way your body adapts. Homeostasis. Your body's going to hit it. Then what do? You're working out 6 days a week. Do we work out 7? You're working out for 2 hours a day. Do we add 2.5 to 3 hours?
Right. Exactly.
And you could just see the fear in her eyes. And I said, let's find what works at the lowest number first. Let's try and figure out 3 days a week, 20 minutes. Let's try that first. See how that works. If you're seeing results, then we got somewhere to go. I can add in another day. I can add in more time. I can add in more intensity if that's appropriate. We have more variables that we can move. If everything's turned up to 10, there's nowhere to go. And your body's going to be in that heightened state of resistance the whole time, producing a ton of cortisol. And if they have a stress-filled job, oh my gosh, forget about it.
Yep. And that's not a recipe for weight loss either.
No.
I mean, it's
their
just
body's going to be more resistant to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's that again, like we keep talking about this, everything in moderation, including moderation, right? Like you get to this point and like moderation is kind of the key. And it is finding that thing. Cause I have thinking of my husband and, friends of ours that we work with who bicycle a lot, like, but they're not in 4 and 5 in terms of their heart rate. They're in 2, 3, a little, occasionally 4, occasionally 5. And a lot of, the old farts that they bicycle with that, do a lot of miles every week. And again, they're not doing it at that high stress level, right? They're going out for a beautiful ride. It's a great day. They go the speed that their body's adapted to, whatever it is. And that really, that's a way that I think of for that group of men that I know, like that is a great way to exercise because they're not getting pushed into overload. They're recovering quickly, right? They found a level they can recover at, but they're keeping like their blood flowing, their heart moving, their legs moving, everything going at a moderate level that they can actually sustain. Many of them are in their 70s and 80s now, and they're still biking. So that's like that's kind of, at this point, I think that's kind of the goal is find something that's sustainable, that you can do, that you can recover from quickly, that makes you feel good, that your body, sort of learns to crave and love, and that is sustainable for you.
Yeah.
Why is that easy to say?
Well, I think it's good for people to hear, though, that something like Orange Theory Fitness, CrossFit, there's a time and a place and an age that all of that is a wonderful, happening thing. Go for it. Enjoy it. Do it to your heart's content. But you always have to ask yourself, are you getting the results you want with it? Is your body recovering enough with each workout?
Yep.
And if it's not, maybe you need to change that up. I know even for myself, 140 beats a minute when I'm doing cardio, 130 to 140, I do it 3 times a week for 30 minutes. And you know what? My heart loves it. I can recover quickly afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that that's good for me cardiovascularly. And yes, occasionally I'll take it up and I'll jazz things up, but it's a way for me to stay cardiovascularly fit without necessarily overstressing my body.
Yep.
And I think everybody needs to figure out what works best for them. And then on top of that, I do weight training twice a week. This is, again, for me, my body is sort of used to more exercise than less. So with a client, I will start them out a little bit less. I'll say, okay, I want you to go for a walk 3 times a week. Go out for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is. And if I know their neighborhood, I'll know how many hills and things like that. I can say, okay, won't even talk about heart rate. Just get moving. Okay, you're coming into me once a week or twice a week. I want you to do this on the other days or on another day, whatever it is. So really trying to give them exactly what their body needs at that time so that their body doesn't have that high stress level, that they're recovering, that they actually enjoy going out for a walk, that they are actually enjoying their workout, and they're going to do the rehab or whatever exercises I'm asking them to do for their goal. And it can really begin to help push them toward their goal without sort of shoving them off the cliff on the way.
I think all of that is exactly right, which is how do we develop a routine? Because that's the other thing.
Yeah.
For so many of my clients, like I had clients in my studio who came in 2 or 3 times a week for years and did Pilates 2 or 3 times a week. And they had done something else, other things, but they had found something that they liked to do, that they were committed to doing, that they would do. And
Mm-hmm.
and and honestly, with a lot of my clients, that's the thing, is how do you get something that they're willing to do, especially at this age, kind of forever. Like there's
Yep.
a baseline, something that works for them, that keeps them going, that keeps them moving, that keeps them feeling good, whatever that is, whether it's Pilates, whether it's weight training, whether it's cardio stuff, whatever it is, swimming, whatever works, right? That they're willing to do and that they'll do regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's really, that's the trick of this age, is you just got to do it. You just got to do it, and you got to keep doing it. And
Yeah.
and if you don't, you'll find it's much harder to recover. It takes much longer to get back to your previous levels of fitness and all that. So,
Yeah. I think having appropriate goals is something else to keep on the outset with these clients, because those who
mhm.
come in who have goals that are unrealistic,
Mm.
it's up to us to sometimes pull them back from that. I remember talking to someone who would promise the client anything. They want to lose 20 pounds in a month. No problem.
We got you. You're like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. You're doing them a disservice by lying to them,
Yeah.
first of all, because you know
Yeah.
that that's not going to happen. So you really want to create, I always want to establish that rapport immediately. So if they say, here's what I want and everything, and I'll say, you know what? Good luck. But I'm not the person for you for that, because
Mhm.
physiologically that's not possible without a lot of intervention, or without you quitting your job and, dedicating your
Devoting
entire
yourself to
life.
something else, right?
you know, that's a
Yeah.
possibility.
If you want to
If
do
you can,
that, go for it. But
if you can afford it, feel free.
yeah.
But I think establishing appropriate goals, whether it be age appropriate, whether it be hormone appropriate, whether it be whatever, but really sitting down and figuring out, okay, what is appropriate for you is going to be different than what's appropriate for your daughter.
Yeah. Yep.
Because you may see what she's doing and you're saying, I really want to look like her. Good luck. She's 18. You're
Right.
no longer 18, and that's okay.
Uh-huh.
I'm no longer, I'm not my kid's age, obviously, but we have to sort of have those conversations sometimes and try and figure out what's a good goal for them that they can achieve and feel successful at. Because I think that mindset too, I think you're going to increase the amount of stress if they never hit their goal, if they can't hit their goal, and they're always sort of up against it thinking I need to, but they're never going
Yeah.
to be able to.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Creating unrealistic goals is not helpful for anybody. Plus, most clients with really unrealistic goals quit.
Exactly.
I mean,
That's true.
that's been my experience, is that if they really can't, if they're expecting to again be like they were when they were 20 and they're now 62, like that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And if they can't come to grips with that, they often get so frustrated and so disappointed that they just, they bail on the whole thing. So that manic version of exercise or commitment to their own health.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think we're coming up on in this is it's challenging. It's
Yeah.
confusing. There's nothing
Mhm.
easy about working with someone who's going through a hormonal change, because your body is different, and it's different than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Not only are you older and your body is not recuperating as quickly, but now you've got an endocrine system that's now in flux, and things are all over the place, and it doesn't even know what's going on. So it's a challenge for us as instructors to be able to program safely for this person and keep them on the right track and make sure that you're getting them to their goals. And I think we just have to sort of take every case as an individual and figure out what's working. If something isn't working, be willing to change course, change direction, change gears, and switch on a dime if you need to. if you see that their bodies aren't changing, or if you see that things are going the opposite way or whatever. And I think also be willing to talk to their doctor or get them to
Yeah.
see their doctor.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about this a little bit. One of the things that I was remembering is one of the challenges that a lot of my women who've gone through menopause or going through menopause have is that their thyroid also can go wacky.
Yes.
That's really common for a lot of the women that I work with, that they go through menopause, they start to gain a lot of weight, they think it's just the estrogen, and then they go and get their thyroid checked, and their thyroid has gone kaput. Thyroid is directly related to stress, for sure.
Yep.
So, many clients I've had to have funky thyroid numbers calm their stress down, and their thyroid numbers get more normal, even without medication. So, so that's another thing just to be aware of. It's like what's happening, and keeping them aware of that, right? Working with your doctor, working with whoever your medical professionals are, to make sure that you're getting monitored and that you know kind of what state you're in, and what the options are in terms of managing that state if it's not working for you. Because we do what we do, but we're not changing your physiology particularly.
Nope.
I mean, exercise does a little bit of that, but that's not its primary job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's a good idea to make sure that they're talking to not only for females, their OBGYN, but also an
Mhm.
endocrinologist, someone who
Yeah,
specializes
exactly.
in this.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many of my clients who they have their general practitioner and then they have their OBGYN, but they don't have an endocrinologist. And I always say, well, maybe that's another doctor to get on board, because they see things from a different lens. I mean, every doctor, I tell people this all the time. If you got a broken leg and you go to a podiatrist, he's going to try and fix your shoes in order to fix your
Exactly.
leg. I,
Exactly.
I mean,
Yes.
we look
Yeah.
through the lens that we know that we have available to
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
So in that sense, see an endocrinologist. What do they recommend? When they're looking at these numbers, maybe they will see something that your general practitioner may not,
Mhm.
you know?
They're looking, they're often looking, I mean, the difference between them and like an OBGYN or even a general practitioner is they're specifically looking, if they're good, at the balance
Yeah.
of all of the elements that are floating around in your system.
Yep.
Right. And the imbalance of all the things that are floating around in your system. And, OBGYN is generally going to look at, like, your hormone levels, your sex hormone levels primarily. And your general practitioner, depending on their
Their
viewpoint and
specialty.
perspective,
Yep.
yeah, or whatever they're focused on at the moment, or whatever you can focus them on at the moment too.
I was going to say, and also their age. I hate to say this, but I've had a number of
Yeah,
them say, "Oh yeah, he's in his 70s now, and he's still practicing." I'm saying, "Great, I'm glad you like him, but
I'm
is
not
he up
going
to
to it.
date? Yeah, is he up to
Exactly.
date with everything that's out there?" And
Yeah.
especially if it's a
Well,
he and you're having hormone issues, maybe a good idea to talk to someone else just to get another perspective.
absolutely,
You know,
absolutely.
not a bad idea.
No, I'm reminded of, when I was at St. Francis Hospital, which was, 30 years ago now. One of our surgeons, and he was an orthopedic surgeon, was like, "Oh, the SI joint doesn't move." I'm like, "Hmm, yeah, I don't think that's correct." But he was trained at a time when
Yeah.
it was believed, and this is a slight random aside, but the reason my understanding is that they thought that is because if you're dissecting old bodies, most of their SI joints have fused by the time because a lot of them start to fuse roughly in their 50s. And so you're dissecting a 70-year-old, which a lot of cadavers are old, that it has fused. So it's not moving.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
and I worked with enough hypermobile dancers to go, "Oh no, that definitely moves." But again, it's just you know what you know, right? And you
Yes.
and you go based on that, and we all do. I mean, I'm learning. I'm really enjoying learning a lot of new things about movement science in my
Mhm.
30 plus years doing this, because when I started, there's a lot of things that I look back on and go, that wasn't right. That wasn't right either. Things
Yep.
that you and I learned, Brian, that were like, I'm glad that
Yeah.
that's evolved. That time,
100%.
experience, and research have moved us forward from some assumptions that were just not right.
Absolutely. And like you said, 30 years ago, hormone replacements were a lot different than they are now.
Yeah, they're a
And a
higher
doctor
dosage
may
for the
have,
most part.
yeah, well, a doctor may have just said, "Here, take this." And
Yeah,
you did what they said, and they may
yeah,
not monitor it closely. Today, I know with my clients, they get checked regularly, and if
yeah,
they start feeling off, My clients make one phone call, they go in for blood work, and then things are adjusted.
Yeah.
And you kind of need that. You don't need to be given a pill like an aspirin and say, here, take this. It's going to solve all your problems. You need someone who's working with you who can
Yeah.
monitor it on an annual basis or more often if need
If
be,
necessary. Hmm.
and be able to adjust it, fine tune it, because your body's going to keep changing. As we age, we continue to change one way or the other. And as those hormone levels change, it'll be, oh, okay, we can take this one down. We should take this one up. And there's a lot more fine tuning now than there ever was before. So that's a benefit. Whereas 30 years ago, we didn't really have that.
No, and you're making me think. So one of the things that has changed for men is testosterone replacement.
Oh, yeah.
But that's relatively new. That was not talked about much a few years ago, and it's a big thing. And you see it on ads and really cheesy ads mostly, um, right? There's like all the like, oh, I don't feel like a young stud
Text
anymore, so
this
I'm going
to
to take
this.
this stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Whatever. But I was wondering, like, I know I just know a few people who have gone down the path of doing testosterone replacement, and
Mhm.
they've had some of the same issues that some of the women have had with estrogen replacement. That they like sometimes it makes him feel great. One of my clients said it jacked him up so much. He's like he couldn't
Yeah.
sleep. His heart was palpitating. It was like felt like he'd just taken 2 cups of coffee.
Yep.
So, so there's also that. It's like everybody needs that. And that's where that moderation, working with your doctor to get the dosage right, to really fine tune your physiology as best you can, given today's modern tools. And I also have to say, if you're not getting the answers you want from the doctor you're working with, and you can afford to and have the resources to find another one, find another one. Because
Yeah.
man, doctors they're not all the same. They're not all the
No.
same. And, ask your friends who have good ones, like get referrals from people that you know, because all of that can make a big difference in terms of really successfully monitoring and managing these
Yep.
transitions as we age.
I've had a number of male clients suddenly confide in me how long they've been taking testosterone. I think
Mm.
testosterone was one of those things, kind of like erectile dysfunction, that was swept under the rug for so many
Right.
years.
Don't talk
You
about
didn't
it.
talk
Right.
about it.
Don't talk about it. Yeah.
It made you less of a man in those
Right.
senses. And
Exactly.
I
If you're taking a pill.
exactly, but I do think that some of those commercials, the one thing that's done a benefit for is they've had athletes come out and say, "Oh yeah, I've aged and I don't feel the same way I did when I was 20." So men are at least willing to say, "Wow, me neither." Now granted, I'm not
Uh-huh.
saying to buy those things. I'm just saying I think it's
Right.
become more in the conversation now that it's
Yeah.
okay to admit that we're getting a little older and that our bodies
Yeah.
are changing. And it's not just our wives, it's us that are also going through a change. And I was telling you, my body in the last year has changed a little bit and a little more fatigued and things. I'm like, maybe I should check that out. Maybe I should get that as part of my panel this year just to see where I'm at, because
Yeah.
it's a good idea just to see. As long as I'm still in normal, I'm happy as a camper. But I
Exactly.
think it's important for men to do it just as it is for women.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So I think we talked
Well,
about quite a bit today. We
there
went
was
through a lot.
there was a free-ranging conversation as it
Yeah,
sometimes is.
but I think we
Again,
covered
yeah,
quite a bit. And
yeah.
I think again, it goes down to the client in front of you and
Mhm.
figuring out what's appropriate for them specifically.
Yeah. Individualization. I mean,
Yeah.
that's our bread and butter in our world
Mhm.
is personal training, Pilates, working with the client in front of you, dealing with their goals, dealing with whatever their physiological or physical situation is, and doing our best to help them get where they want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for listening. That hour went by relatively quickly. Uh, do us a favor, like we say, please hit that like and subscribe button. Comment when you can. We really appreciate it. You can reach out to us at movingcombos@gmail.com. Check us out on Instagram at Moving Combos. And for Nora St. John and Brian Ritchie, we will see y'all next week.
Bye, guys.